BMW unveiled their £31,000 World Superbike homologation special last week, the M1000RR. And if you add the M Performance Pack for about £4,000, that takes the total to £35,000, which is pretty much the same price as Ducati's own Superbike special, the Panigale V4R. But which one is the best? In today's video, we'll take a look at the specs of each bike in order to figure out which of these incredible machines is the king of the road legal race bikes. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news and rumours right here on YouTube, then please do remember to hit subscribe. Let's start with the engines, and the BMW M1000RR uses a modified version of the 999cc inline-4 that powers their super popular S1000RR sports bike. It inherits the same shift cam variable valve timing and valve lift system, which translates to strong low and mid-range torque before shifting over to more aggressive cams at 9,000 RPM for a rush of powerful top end. Modifications that are specific to the M1000RR engine include new two-ring forged pistons, adapted combustion chambers, increased compression, longer and lighter titanium conrods, slimmer and lighter rocker arms, fully machined intake ports with new duct geometry, and optimizations on the camshafts and intake area. There's also a lightweight titanium exhaust courtesy of Akrapovic, which saves almost 4 kilograms over the standard S1000RR. As for the Ducati V4R, it uses a 998cc version of their Desmo Sedici Stradale V4 engine, which is over 100cc smaller in capacity to that used in their other Panigale V4s, owing to the 1000cc cap on bikes that compete in the Superbike World Champs. Features of this engine that differ from the M1000RR include, of course, its V4 layout with a twin-pulse firing order that reproduces some of the character of the V-twins that Ducati used long before they moved over to 4-cylinder engines. It also has a counter-rotating crankshaft which helps to neutralize some of the rotational inertia of the wheels and drivetrain, resulting in a more nimble and agile machine. And of course, as the Desmo Sedici Stradale name suggests, it uses desmodromic valves like other Ducatis, whereby the camshafts both open and close the valves, as opposed to spring-actuated valve closure in most other motorcycles. This can help to eliminate valve float, which can occur particularly at high revs, leading to better performance. Other notable features of the V4R's engine include lighter internal components than the 1100cc version, such as titanium conrods and intake valves, as well as improved air intake efficiency owing to oval throttle bodies and aerodynamic throttle openings, which are connected to variable height air intake horns. Ducati claim that this helps the R version rev up quicker, as well as increasing the redline for more top-end performance. But at the end of the day, all that will matter to most of you is the power figures. The BMW is capable of 212 horsepower at 14,500 RPM, whereas the Ducati does 221 horses slightly higher up at 15,250 RPM. But it's worth noting that it can also go on to produce an incredible 234 horsepower peak with the optional track-only Akrapovic full system. Perhaps no surprise given all the work that Ducati have done to improve the revvy top end of their engine, but what about peak torque? They actually produce similar figures of 113 Nm at 11,000 RPM for the BMW and 112 at 11,500 RPM for the Ducati, so there's really not a lot in it. Perhaps the shift cam tech makes the M1000RR more usable below the 9,000 RPM at which it changes, and you can see from these dyno charts from Cycle World that at 6,000 RPM the BMW makes about 80 horsepower, whereas the Ducati is around the 70 horsepower mark. But ultimately, these bikes are built for the track where they'll be operating high up in the rev range, so this one has to go to the Ducati for its superior peak power. The difference in engine layout will also affect the sound of the two bikes significantly. I don't have a clear clip of the M1000RR, but here's the sound of the HP4 Race, which is essentially the predecessor to the M with the same inline-4 layout. then for comparison, here's a clip of the V4R on the dyno as well. The BMW certainly has that typical screaming inline-4 sound when the revs pick up, whereas the twin pulse of the Ducati brings a touch of character to the exhaust note. Let me know which one you think sounds best in the comments below. Comparing the chassis specs of these two bikes on paper obviously can't account for how the bikes feel, how they grip and how quickly they can lap a circuit, but realistically I'm not going to be riding either of these £35,000 monsters anytime soon, nor would I have the skills to take them to their limits, but let's take a look anyways. The BM uses a bridge type cast aluminium frame with the engine as a stressed member. There's an aluminium swing arm which is a little longer than the S1000RRs, and it also has an adjustable pivot point, allowing fine-tuning of the suspension geometry during track use. The M1000RR uses fully adjustable 45mm upside-down forks and a fully adjustable rear shock, both of which they say are optimized for track use. And as standard, it comes with BMW's M carbon wheels, which are 1.6 kilograms lighter than the standard aluminium wheels, which are already 1.7 kilograms lighter than the previous generation. BMW say that these super light wheels translate into improved agility and riding dynamics. As for the V4R, it uses the same front frame system that Ducati introduced on the standard V4, predominantly using the engine for structure and with the front frame, subframe and swing arm pivot attached at various points. But the front frame specifically used on the V4R has machined sides which help to reduce weight whilst maintaining rigidity. As with the BMW, the swing arm pivot point is adjustable, although Ducati uses a single-sided swing arm as opposed to the double of the M1000RR. You could argue that tyre changes can be easier with the single, whereas the double could be lighter and stiffer, but ultimately Ducatis just look right with a single-sider. The suspension of the V4R comes from Öhlins in the form of their pressurized 43mm NPX 25/30 forks with titanium nitride treatment on the stanchions to reduce friction and look cool. The shock is their fully adjustable TTX 36 unit. Now it's worth noting that the road-going equivalents of both bikes are equipped with electronic semi-active suspension that uses data from the bike sensors in order to adjust damping front and rear on the fly. But neither of these much more expensive bikes use that technology because it's currently banned in the World Superbike Technical Rulebook. The V4R comes with Marcassini's forged aluminium wheels which, like the carbon wheels on the BM, ought to be pretty light, contributing to a slender dry weight of 172 kilograms or 193 wet. That's a couple of kilograms more than the M1000RR, which tips the scales at 170 kilograms dry. But the Akropovich race system that adds the extra power to the V4R also sheds a good few kilograms to bring that dry weight right down to 165. BMW worked with Nissin and applied their collective knowledge from their World Superbike partnership in order to create what they're calling the first ever M brake. It's lighter than the calipers on the S1000RR by 60 grams, offers better cooling, and a revised ratio at the lever offers better feel. It also looks pretty bling in a blue anodized finish with M logo, and the blue finish is carried over to the two-pot rear brake as well. Ducati, on the other hand, have gone with the tried and tested Brembo style M calipers and on larger discs too, 330mm at the front and 245 at the rear to the 320 and 220 of the BMW. With all that horsepower and braking power on hand, stability going into and out of corners is paramount, with many manufacturers now adopting aero winglets to create additional downforce on their top-end sports bikes. These two are no different, with the M1000RR using a design developed both on track and in BMW's wind tunnel, capable of creating 11.3 kilograms of downforce at 250 kilometers per hour. Ducati, on the other hand, claim that their winglet design creates more downforce than their MotoGP bikes, with the monoplane wings on the V4R quoted as 30 kilograms at 270 kilometers per hour. That's significantly more than the M1000RR at a roughly equivalent speed. These homologated superbikes are absolutely rammed with the latest tech, and although I can't vouch for the effectiveness of their specific implementations, in terms of features the two bikes are matched pretty closely. Both use a TFT dash, of course, which incorporates a GPS lap timer for track use, as well as a pit limiter. There are riding modes, power modes, cornering traction control and ABS, wheelie control, slide control, launch control and engine braking control settings on both bikes. And in terms of mechanical tech, they both get an up and down quick shifter and lightweight batteries. There's really not a lot in it, but the BMW edges this one with a few creature comforts that you might not expect on a track-focused rocket. Both bikes have self-cancelling indicators, but the M1000RR adds cruise control and heated grips for those chilly winter commutes. On top of that, it also includes their Hill Start Control Pro, which can automatically detect an incline and hold the brakes until you move off. It's usually included on heavy touring bikes, where rolling backwards with luggage and a passenger is far more likely, and you'd have to hope that the rider of a £35,000 212 horsepower superbike had already mastered hill starts, but you have to give it to BMW for the comprehensiveness of their technology here. Not that anyone buying a bike at this level would be swayed by the looks, but it's worth a comparison of the visuals anyway. In many ways, there's not a lot in it, with both having an aggressive design, hunching forward with a super short tail section. They also both get taller screens than their road-focused equivalents and frowning twin LED headlights to create a similar front end. I do like the M Sport paint job and extra carbon of the BMW, which elevates it to something that looks more exotic than the S1000RR, but at the same time, the classic red of the Ducati with a sharper, higher tail end, single-sided swing arm and bare aluminium tank is hard to resist. So with all that in mind, it's time to have your say. If you had the 35 grand burning a hole in your pocket, which would you go for? Let me know in the comments below. Both have their merits, but I'd love to know which bike you'd choose and why. So leave me a comment, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.